Hey everyone, it has been a very, very long time since I've posted a miniature wargaming related video on my channel, but somewhere in the depths of time I used to post my Flames of War army collection videos, and they were just a ton of fun to do and to record and then to even kind of watch back later. So in that vein, I decided to do that for Legion. I have all four factions, and they're fairly complete. I do have some holes, especially in the newer stuff, because I kind of took a couple of months off from painting. But we're currently in the midst of a global pandemic, so what better time to do a whole lot of painting and than to record your painting? So without further ado, I'm going to jump in by unit subtype. We're going to start with core and kind of work our way through the army there, just to get some kind of close-ups and talk very broadly about my experiences with the units. Should be a lot of fun, so hang in there. All right, so away we go. First and foremost, my rebel faction core troopers. And I gotta say, I gotta set an expectation. I think these are my worst painted miniatures, more or less. When I very first got the box, I was like, I'm not going to spend much time on painting Legion stuff. It's so easy to get bogged down in painting. I want to play, but I'm not going to care about the quality so much. And I mostly stuck to that for my core troops. But yeah, I quickly kind of stepped my game up. So looking back at these, I'm like, ugh, I kind of want to just redo them. So really, they were very basic block colors and washes. I think I pretty much used Null Oil, just mixed 50-50 for every single thing here and barely went back and did any highlights. The only kind of interesting things I did is I bought a couple of those little resin sprues with alien heads. So you can see I've got a little Mon Cal here. There's a Mon Cal back there on the ion gun, so obviously gets a lot of play there. Oh, that's not the ion, never mind. But also Celestin there. And I have a couple more. I think I have a total of 6 trooper units, but I figured for the purposes of this video, or 6 of the rebel trooper units, that is, no one needs to see more of these guys. Pretty basic, standard rebel troops. They pretty much see play in every single game of Rebels, obviously. So now, in hindsight, I do wish I had painted them better. Now, next up are my fleets. You can see, again, I use one of those leftover Mon Cal heads. And, here I think I put a little bit more effort into them. By this point, I was rekindling my enjoyment of painting. And so, kind of tried a little harder on these guys. Ultimately, pretty happy with how they wound up. Rarely put them on the table. In fact, I have a second unit that I kind of keep in cold storage in case they ever get really awesome again. 1 unit is typically enough, and more often than not, 0 units is the better play. So rounding it out with my third core unit option are the Rebel Vets. Now, these guys, I wanted them to look distinct from my troopers, but still use some of the same color palette. I also, even though they're clearly in cold weather garb, I didn't want to suddenly have a bunch of guys running around in snow pants and heavy jackets, so I kind of tried to make it look somewhat plausible that they're in the same climate as the other guys. And ultimately, you kind of have to suspend your disbelief just a little bit. I'm a big fan of the Rebel Trooper, or Rebel Veterans Trooper unit. I think they're a lot of fun to play. I often include them in a list. The Blaster, I don't know, I'm kind of split on. I include it sometimes. Occasionally the fire support is really sweet, to bolster a big dice pool and wipe something off the board, but more often than not, at range 3, this guy is just kind of struggling to become relevant and make something happen. But he's cheap, so he often sees play. So there you have it. There's my core troops. I don't have any of the Rebel Core Trooper upgrades yet. The pack that came with the DLTA and whatever else is in that box. I think only the DLTA is exciting. I have some of those to get painted up. They're just not quite done yet. I do have the personnel upgrades, which I'll show in a quick subsequent video. Okay, so next up are my special forces. You will see that even though this is January 2021, I do not yet have Mandalorians painted. I own them. They are soon in the painting queue, and I'm really excited to get them on the table. But this is what I have for right now, so without further ado, let's go into them. See if you can count how many times I say without further ado this video. So first up are the just regular kind of Rebel Scouts. Don't see a whole lot of use much, but I think they've recently gotten some points reductions and stuff, so I almost never use the full unit, but I have a couple of times, and they're kind of fun. Low profile, Sharpshooter 1 gives them a little bit of play, but really it's about those strike teams, right? And you can see here, I went ahead and did the whole, competitive meta thing with the multiple strike teams. You can also see that I kind of chose the wrong figure as the just regular Joe. I chose the commander, who looks cool because he's spotting, but used to give me a lot of heartache in tournaments when someone could see the tip of his gun poking over something and say, oh, I got both of them. Now, of course, there's the silhouette rule, so that's no longer an issue. And then over here, just past these Wookiees, I've got my other strike team. Kind of painted them all in different camouflage schemes just to help keep them apart. Speaking of Wookiees, here they are. Still don't like them. I've never been able to use them successfully, even with all their recent changes. I've put them on the board twice since, and I don't know. They really don't do it for me. They look cool. They were an absolute blast to paint. And I'm sure we'll see some form of Wookiee representation in the Grand Army of the Republic soon, but yeah, they really don't do it for me. I'm not sure what they need, but they're just not quite there. And then lastly, Pathfinders. I really, really like these guys. I love running them. I thought about buying multiple boxes, but in the end I kind of settled on just one, and that's often enough. I really still love Infiltrate, have really learned to use it well and be pretty cautious with these guys, don't overextend them, and they quite frequently perform really well for me. Of course, have Biston, who I almost never take. I usually opt for POW instead, and I'm pretty sure to date I have forgotten 90% of the time that POW has Inspire, so there you go. Pro tip, remember that POW has Inspire. Alright, so there's my Special Forces units. Let's move right along. Alright, just a quick segment here. This is my personnel upgrade box. As you can see, I've purchased 2 of them, but I've only painted up 1, and then the medic from another one. There was a hot second there where I was taking 2 medics pretty regularly, and it worked pretty well, but for the most part, I'm usually taking 1 or more often none at this point. Don't know that I've ever run the Astromech, maybe just like a Jankless playing around with ATRTs or something. The officer gets a pretty good amount of play. I use him quite a bit, either bolstering a unit or standalone, more often than not standalone, especially with some of the new command upgrades these days. He's kind of just great to have in the middle of your army. And then I've actually used the comms officer quite a bit in my veterans. I think you can do some pretty fun shenanigans there, and frequently I'll have her with a HQ uplink on the vets to get one really big, reliable turn out of them and the blaster. Sometimes on a 1-pip, having the veterans and the blaster delete a unit is really worth it, but more often than not, again, she kind of stays at home. This upgrade, I think, was really about the medics and the officers, but I think there's some pretty fun play there. Okay, next up are support units. Obviously, there's 3 at this time for the Rebels, and I went a little ham on 2 of them, as you can tell. So the classic ATRT, right in the very beginning of the game, these things were kind of great. I don't even know the last time I put one on the board now. Certainly not for the Republic, and neither for the Rebels. But they were fun to do, and each of my guns are actually magnetized, so I can swap them out or even kind of pose them in a cool fashion. Again, you can see I did the head swap on one of them, just to make the Rebels look a little more, diverse and maybe even a little bit more ragtag without the matching uniforms and stuff. I think it does a lot for them. But there you have it. There's ATRTs, no big deal. Now, Tauntauns, these guys are obviously fantastic. They're both really fun to play. I think the most recent changes make them a lot less frustrating to face. But these guys were so much fun to paint. These are actually the very first things I ever painted with contrast paint. And while I've learned a couple of tips and tricks since then, I still think, this really highlights the ability of contrast paint to get things on the table quickly, because I did not spend very long on these guys at all. And there in the back, we have the 1.4 FD. I think that's how you say it. Is it 14.1 or something? 1.4, I think. Yeah, I always forget what it is because, who cares? Rarely put this thing on the table. Almost every single time I do, I wished I had put anything else on the table for those same point costs. But I have faced a couple opponents who used a pair of them to pretty good effect, and they were kind of nasty. At the very least, they look really cool. They're absolute must in your army to get that Hoth look, where again, I'm trying to make my guys not look like they're on an ice planet there. But a fun unit, not, in my humble opinion, a terribly competitive unit, though, I'm always willing to be proven wrong. And there you have it for supports. Okay, just about done now. Moving on into heavies, of which there are only 2 for the Rebels, and I have 1 of each. Here is the original speeder. I gotta say, my paint job, I don't know what was going on here. Looking back, I can't remember. I must have been experimenting on something. I think it looks okay from a distance, but if you really get up close and personal with it, it's got some funky stuff going on. I don't remember why. But I did try to make the kind of reflections of the board I envision I have at home, the kind of green grass and blue sky battlefield, tried to have that reflecting in the cockpit, which I think turned out pretty good. T-47 is a blast right now. It's kind of back. We've used it a couple times on the table since the change with the surge to crit, and I think this thing is absolutely nasty. It's been a lot of fun to see. What we haven't seen in a while is the speeder. I think the changes to transport make it, maybe kind of interesting to try out, but this was definitely a really fun model. I have the 2 additional crew members. They're magnetized on there, so I can choose to kind of have them on or leave them off. Same with the blaster, which I realized I forgot to put on here. I have all 3, the regular blaster and the ion blaster sort of set aside. I can connect it as needed, so I can be a little bit WYSIWYG. Anyways, a cool model. Not sure how much play it's going to continue to see here, but as always, hopefully the game evolves and they become, a viable unit. All right, last but not least, it's Commanders and Operatives. These are just a ton of fun, and I think this is really the heart of the Rebel Army right now in Legion. It's really about characters. I quite frequently often run, 4 or 5 named characters in lists, and they do quite well. So it kind of feels like that's where a lot of the focus in Rebels is right now. And they're just a blast. So obviously here you can see the Wonder Twins, Leia, and the newer sculpt, the Jedi Luke, which, so awesome seeing him again. And back here I have old farm boy Luke, kind of a less interesting paint job and less interesting sculpt, but I just love the Jedi Luke. He's just so awesome and so much fun to play with, so much fun to paint, all of it. Speaking of fun to paint, here's my humble attempt at Sabine. A lot of the details I think are getting a little washed out in the camera light, but she came out okay. Pretty happy with her. She's an absolute joy to play. She's so much fun to have on the table. Here, of course, we have everyone's favorite 2 droids. Another just so much fun to paint those guys. It's so fun painting the iconic characters. Like Han, who I wish was not in his indoor coat. I kind of wish he was in his smuggler vest, and I'm sure there's plenty of cool 3D prints I could get, and I probably will. Not a huge fan of the decision to put him on indoor. Love the Chewie sculpt. Probably of all these characters, Chewie's who I use the least, although again, I think he looks like he could be kind of fun with some of the recent changes. And then over here, the Rogue One characters, my favorite Star Wars movie, and these are some of my favorite characters in the game. I mean, Cassian and K2 are just absolutely bonkers, and Jyn was really my first competitive list, was really centered around Jyn, and I think I got quite good at her. In fact, I went to Adepticon 2018, maybe 2019? Wow, I don't even know what year it is. I guess it must have been 2019. And I think I was the only person in the last chance qualifier who used Jyn out of, tons of players. I don't know, a couple dozen players. So I still like her. I think she can still be really nasty and catch kind of people off guard. But man, I gotta say, Cassian and K2 are just bonkers good and so much fun to play. So there you go. That's kind of it for the Rebel faction. Thank you guys for checking this out. Appreciate you sticking it through if you've made it this far. Let me know what you think, if there's anything else you'd like to see. Otherwise, I will move on to part 2 and get my Imperial forces done up here in the next few days. Thanks again.